deaths are up, hospitals are overflowing, Delta is everywhere in the country.
More than 675,000 Americans overall who have now died of COVID.
Today's numbers are still a reminder of just how deadly COVID is.
There's a very good chance you're not going to die.
As someone who watches the news more than I probably should, I've seen a lot of this type of stuff over the last couple years. Numbers on the screen, trying their best to represent the lives lost to COVID-19. And yes, when you see that 5 million people across the world have died, or that the United States represents the biggest share of those deaths by far, with almost 800,000, you recognize that those are terribly, tragically high numbers. But still, those numbers haven't been enough to convince many people of the seriousness of COVID-19.
The models, folks, are just plain wrong.
Or of the need for basic public health measures like masks.
You can do it, you don't have to do it, I'm choosing not to do it.
And vaccines.
It's just a shot.
It's been tough to convince some people that COVID-19 even exists.
This is their new hoax.
Let alone that it has robbed millions of people of their lives.
This week, the U.S. matched the death toll from another terrible virus, the 1918 influenza.
So if simply seeing and hearing these numbers isn't enough to show why those of us who have been lucky enough to keep our lives should be doing everything we can to prevent COVID from spreading, maybe instead of continuing to bombard you with those numbers, I could try telling you about just one of the people that they represent. And if by some miracle there is anyone watching this who doesn't know someone who was lost to COVID, by the time I'm finished, you will. But before I tell you about him, I'll start by telling you a little bit about me. My name is Cody Watson. I live in Kansas with my wife and our 2 children. And I'm a filmmaker by trade, but my day job since July of 2019 has been working as a receptionist at an urgent care clinic. For a while, it felt like the perfect job for me to work while I'm getting through film school. At least, it was perfect until. For me, the first sign that something was wrong was that there were way more patients coming in with flu-like symptoms that winter than there were the last one. And after about a month or 2 of that,
January 20th, the first case on U.S. soil, a man from Washington State.
I really can't believe I'm saying it now, but when I started at my job, I didn't have to wear a mask to work, and I honestly wouldn't have ever thought to. But since March 23rd of 2020, I haven't set foot inside that building without one. That spring and summer was one of the most difficult and traumatic time periods I have ever gone through. Telling you all the things I and everyone I worked with had to deal with during that time would be another film in itself. But suffice it to say that at the height of the pandemic, my facility would test 200, 300, sometimes 400 patients every day. I would be at work for 12 hours a day, 3 times a week, and be on the phone checking in patients from their cars literally that entire time. Save for a 30-minute lunch break and a couple times a day where I had to leave my desk to go cry in the bathroom and pee while I'm in there. So that was my life at the height of the pandemic. Luckily, things did calm down significantly, at my clinic at least, by the fall. And meanwhile, in a small Illinois town called Pekin, there was this man. This is my uncle, Dennis Watson. We called him Denny. He had an older brother named Terry, my dad. He had a wife, my Aunt Laura, and a daughter, my cousin Chelsea, and a grandson named Tate. The following pictures are from his Facebook account. As I was scrolling through his timeline in preparation for this film, I found that the posts that he was making in the months leading up to his passing are an eerily perfect representation of who he was as a person. This one is from August. It's a little home classroom that they had to set up for Tate when classes went online during the lockdown. These next few are from September. My uncle had just started his retirement that year, and had just bought a new house, which he loved. He and my aunt also loved gardening. She grew lots of flowers and plants, and since my uncle also loved cooking, they even grew their own fruits and vegetables. Little side note here, but I also love this picture that my uncle posted on September 18th. Because even though on the surface it's nothing more than one of those sappy memes that old people are always posting on Facebook, when it's coming from my uncle, I know it's coming from his heart. And that is where my uncle's posts stop until January 6th. Yes, January 6th, I know, but it's not what you think. You see, besides being, January 6th, that is also the day that my uncle revealed that he had tested positive for COVID-19. The real reason I've been telling you about my uncle's life through Facebook is because that is the only way I was able to get any updates on him for the last 2 weeks of his life. He had some days where he got better, and some days where he got worse. January 20th was a lot of things. It was the day that Joe Biden was inaugurated as president. It was the 1-year anniversary of the first confirmed case of COVID-19 in the United States. And it was the day that my uncle finally lost his battle with the virus. So, what do I want you to take away from this story? Well, I'll tell you what I take away from it. It's a lot of conflicting feelings. I struggle to not carry anger and blame in my heart about who or what is responsible for my uncle's death, even though I know that there are appropriate places to point that anger and blame.
There were about 100,000 deaths that came from that original surge. All of the rest of them, in my mind, could have been mitigated or decreased substantially.
I also lost my dad this year. Taking the trip to Illinois to celebrate my uncle's life was the last thing I ever got to do with him. And even though my dad was the type of person who would always put on a happy face, I really think his health, which already wasn't the greatest, started declining rapidly after the trauma of losing his younger brother. So I also struggle with the idea that if COVID hadn't been allowed to fester like it was, maybe my uncle and my dad would both still be here. But what I hope you will take away from this story is that you have the power to help stop the pandemic. Because again, it's not over yet. About 1,000 people per day are still dying in this country, and it's people of any age who are dying. From babies like my nephew, who my uncle never got to meet, to children like Tate, to younger people like me and Chelsea, all the way up to middle-aged people like my uncle, and older people like my grandpa. So, if you don't want to wear a mask when you go out in public around other people who might be vulnerable to things like COVID, or if you haven't found a reason to get vaccinated because maybe you think your immune system will be good enough to fight it, consider the people around you, the people you love. You'd never think you'll lose any of them to a little thing like COVID. You'd think they can fight it off too. But for 800,000 Americans, and 5 million human beings across the world, that wasn't the case. And the most effective way that we have right now to prevent our families and friends from becoming another number like my uncle is getting vaccinated. So I say, if you don't want to get the shot to protect yourself, then do it for the people you love. And do it to honor the people we've lost. Do it for Denny.